silken taste of Diet Shasta. Ooh, you wear it well.
A question for you. 4 Serta mattresses from Slumberland. Twin, full, queen, and king. Which one costs more? Well, common sense says the big one costs more than the small one, but that's too obvious. In fact, this week at Slumberland, the big one costs the same as the small one. $81 for the mattress, $81 for the box spring, whether it's a twin, full, queen, or king-size sort of bed. Do you realize what a good deal that is? It's such a good deal, we're only going to offer it till Saturday at Slumberland. Don't miss it. It's a good buy.
WCCO Television, Minneapolis, St. Paul.
From WCCO Television, Minneapolis, St. Paul, the Northwest's leading news station, this is the Noon Report.
And welcome to the Noon Report. I'm Debbie Ely. In the news this noon, it is day 2 of the air controller strike, and about 50% of the nation's commercial flights are grounded, so if you're planning to fly, you'd best be prepared for some delays.
That strike by PATCO members has overshadowed another strike affecting Minnesotans, the walkout by 14,000 state employees. But the state and AFSCME are talking today, and we'll have a live report from Karen Boros on the scene of those negotiations in Arden Hills. And some rough weather hit the edges of our area yesterday. Dan, can we expect more of the same today?
We are still in a slight risk area of severe weather for later today, and I'll tell you about the details a little bit later on, Deb.
Okay, thank you, Dan. U.S. District Court Judge Miles Lord has issued a restraining order ordering air traffic controllers in Minnesota back on the job. That came just moments ago. The restraining order will be in effect for 10 days. It was served on union officials late this morning. One official said the matter will be discussed with union lawyers. Lord said he will consider a permanent injunction as requested by the U.S. Attorney's Office if the issue is not settled in Washington. Controllers, however, are still on strike. And despite a court ruling in Washington, the threat of substantial fines, the leadership of the Professional Air Traffic Controllers Union, PATCO, says the strike goes on. In fact, as Union Chief Robert Poley walked from a Washington court hearing last night, he announced that the strike will continue. With only an estimated 29% of the air controllers on the job, in the addition of their supervisors filling the gaps, some 50% of the nation's commercial flights were canceled on Monday. But the Federal Aviation Administration is predicting improvements today. FAA spokesmen are saying air traffic may operate at 75% of normal today. Of course, since the strike started, the FAA has asked the major airlines to cut back those flights. The first to go are the short runs, the ones that are less than 500 miles. As a result, it was a common scene at airports around the country to see passengers either stranded or delayed. Those passengers who just could not wait made other arrangements. Car rental companies like Avis reported a booming business in one-way rentals, and it was much the same situation for bus companies and Amtrak. One Amtrak official says if this keeps up, the strike could permanently strengthen Amtrak ridership.
In several states, federal judges have decided not to wait for Washington to force the air controllers back to work. Judges in New York, Wisconsin, and Minnesota have ruled PATCO members should head back to their control towers. Mike Walsher reports on last night's ruling.
Acting U.S. Attorney John Lee pressed for the unusual late-night hearing, arguing that irreparable injury was being done to the U.S. government. The lawyer for the striking controllers called that statement precipitous, and he argued that Judge Miles Lord lacked jurisdiction. In court, Judge Lord called the effort to obtain the restraining order legal overkill. He compared it with the efforts of the government in the 1960s to legally block anti-Vietnam War demonstrations. But he said, with the safety of the flying public at stake, he had to issue the order, effective as soon as it served physically on the strikers.
I'm not always sure the government's right in everything it does, the executive branch, no matter who the president is. The plane should fly, but they should take a good look at the complaints.
The recognition of the safety issue encouraged the controller's lawyer.
I think that the safety issues have been undermined for a long time now, and I think that that kind of recognition that there are things other than just dollars that are behind what's happening here is important to be brought out.
It's unclear just when the court order will be served or how long the controllers will have to either defy it or go back to work. But the government is prepared to use the order to put more pressure on the strikers.
I think that it has whatever teeth the judge chooses to put in it if we come back to court and ask that he find any of the people that it's addressed to in contempt of court.
Mike Walcher, WCCO Television News, Minneapolis.
And once again, word just into Channel 4 News, U.S. District Judge Miles Lord has issued that restraining order ordering air traffic controllers in Minnesota back on the job. The restraining order will be in effect for 10 days. So far, there's only been one near miss reported since the start of the strike, but Federal Aviation Administration officials blame pilot error, not the absence of the regular air controllers, for the close call between two commercial jets over New Jersey. Apparently, one pilot misunderstood his altitude instructions and came within a quarter of a mile of another airplane.
Another strike has been idling 14,000 state employees for the last 2 weeks and has forced hundreds of non-striking workers into unaccustomed jobs. That strike is by the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. At 10 o'clock this morning, negotiators for the union and the state went back to the bargaining table in Arden Hills. Karen Boros is standing by with a live report. Karen?
Debbie, both sides are here, but they have not yet met face-to-face. State mediator Ken Boxell spoke to reporters just a few minutes ago. He says he's been speaking with both sides through the morning and says it's much too early to predict if the chances for a settlement today. The union met behind closed doors for about a half an hour this morning before union negotiator Bob Curry emerged to tell Boxell something. They disappeared into behind a closed door. Boxell then came out, walked down the hall, and disappeared into the room he has reserved here at this hotel for his own headquarters. From there, he may or may not have telephoned the state. Most of the negotiating has been going on over the telephone. I spoke with state negotiator Jim Geisner, who said he expects the two sides to get together before the day is done, but the state has some ideas that it is, to use his words, costing out. When I asked Geisner if it would be the state or the union that came forward with a new proposal today, he said that too much is being made over who goes first, although for the last 2 weeks the state has been saying that it is up to the union to come forward with a new proposal. At this point, the union has adjourned for lunch. The state's meeting room door is closed. They may or may not be meeting behind that door. Both sides are expected to be ready should Boxell call them together by 12:30. Live from Arden Hills, I'm Karen Boros.
Thank you, Karen. We'll have an update on that again at 5 o'clock. Commuter traffic is snarled in Warsaw, Poland again today, but a demonstration by bus drivers, not the air traffic controllers, is to blame. The drivers moved their vehicles to the center of the city yesterday, protesting food shortages. Then when police moved in to halt the demonstration, the drivers decided to stay put. They bedded down in the buses and plan to stay there till at least Wednesday. West Germany has had a second day of protests as well. About 30 people described as protesters against the government of the Ayatollah Khomeini pushed their way into an Iranian government office in Berlin. They held 6 hostages for about an hour before they were driven out by police. 25 of the demonstrators were arrested, but no injuries were reported. Yesterday, another anti-Khomeini group invaded the Iranian embassy in Bonn.
A major fire in Eden Prairie this morning. The blaze gutted a large concrete storage shed at the Midwest asphalt plant. We do know that one employee had to be treated for burns. Fire crews still on the scene. We'll have more on that fire if it becomes available during the newscast. Coming up on the noon report, the tax cut bill is already halfway to reality, with the House vote expected shortly.
How do you get shirts so clean, Mr. Lee?
Ancient Chinese secret.
My husband, some hotshot. Here's his ancient Chinese secret, Calgon. Calgon's 2 water softeners soften wash water so detergents clean better. In hardest water, Calgon helps detergents get laundry up to 30% cleaner. We need more Calgon. Ancient Chinese secret, huh?
Calgon helps detergents get laundry up to 30% cleaner.
The No Pest Strip. It's round-the-clock protection because No Pest kills 24 hours a day.
Flies? Mosquitoes? Ridiculous.
The Kicks host the New York Cosmos Wednesday night at 8 here on Channel 4.
In Washington today, the House is gearing up to vote on President Reagan's tax cut bill. The Senate passed it yesterday, so following this afternoon's House action, it will head to the White House for the president's signature. But don't plan on spending that tax cut any too quickly. Minnesota Senator Dave Durenberger told our Skip Loescher about an hour ago that the entire economic reform plan counts on us saving the money that we would have otherwise paid to Uncle Sam.
Nobody's going to be able to buy a new house or a new car. Interest rates will stay high, I'm sure, for several more months. The economy is not going to turn around in the near term. But when it does start to turn around, I think people are going to be so anxious to make sure that it doesn't blip and then go back up again, that individually and collectively, we're going to resist the urge to run out and borrow to the hilt, and because inflation is the thing we all hate, and we'll do anything we can do individually to lick it.
You know, usually journalists stay behind the television cameras and rarely make the news, but later this week, WCCO-TV's Skip Loescher packs his bag and moves his family to Washington, D.C. Skip will be wearing a new hat, figuratively speaking, begins a new job for Channel 4. He's now the news director of our Washington bureau. And that new assignment is the beginning of a new era in local programming, not only for Skip Loescher, but for all of the broadcast industry.
Yes, indeed. It is the first time a Minnesota television station has had a permanently stationed news crew in Washington to find out what the federal government is doing to us and for us.
As a matter of fact, throughout the entire country, there aren't too many.
No, there are very few. I mean, you can count them on two hands.
It makes use of satellite technology, right?
That's right. All of the reports will go from Washington, D.C. to 22,600 miles above the equator and back down to Minnesota faster than you can blink your eye.
Now, you're not going there alone?
No, I'm not going there alone. Scott McLean will be our production coordinator in Washington, responsible for everything from the inception of the video on videotape to start with through the technical coordination of the satellite feeds.
What sort of reports and how frequently can we expect them, Scott?
Starting in October, Bill will be broadcasting live on the 5 p.m. report regularly, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays of each week, irregularly on other newscasts depending on the stories. We really do hope to do the local effect kind of story. What is this piece of legislation in terms of what does it mean to us here? Not to people in Los Angeles or New York, but to the folks who live around here.
We wish you well, Skip, though our viewers will be seeing you nearly as often as they do now. We'll miss you right around the Channel 4
I will
studio.
miss being here, and I certainly will miss living in Minnesota, I'll tell you that much.
Godspeed to you and your family,
Thank
Skip.
you, sir.
I'm not too up on the Washington baseball team's record, but the Twins have bombed out, at least so far as the starting lineup is concerned for the All-Stars. The lineup for the American League team was announced this morning, and as of the close, the Twins came out, the only ones to be included were former Twins member Reggie Jackson and St. Paul's Dave Winfield. The Yankees placed 4 men on the starting lineup. Reserve players will be named by the respective managers, and at least one player from each team must be named to the American League team for Sunday's game in Cleveland.
With Bud Kraehling completing his annual vacation trek to Minnesota's North Woods, Dan Carlson has been filling in for Bud in our weather center. But Bud's the kind of guy who can't stay away from a camera, so he sent us this message from his vacation retreat.
This is Burnside Lake, part of the Boundary Waters canoe area. From here, you can portage over to Crab Lake, Little Crab, Lunetta, go on and catch the big ones out that way. In a couple of weeks, though, it'll be getting a little cool for canoeing, maybe a little rough as the winds swing out of the north, and I'll be heading back to Minneapolis and St. Paul to join Debbie Ely and the rest of the gang for the noon report. So I'll be back in Minneapolis, St. Paul, talking about that kind of weather on Monday, August 17th.
Dan will be here substituting for Bud when we return.
And we'll find out how the airlines are deciding which flights to take off when our travel specialist, Bill O'Neill, files his second report. That and more on the noon report.
Do you long for a more fulfilling relationship with the man you love? In this week's Star, sex expert Sherry Height reveals 7 vital secrets women should know about men. Also in the Star, how to eat and stay slim with the diet of the stars. How to beat the agony of sinus pain. 8 helpful tips. Find out in the Star. Plus a Dear Meg special, the #1 problem that could threaten your marriage. And catch the real-life loves of your favorite soaps.
Meet the man who stole my heart.
I meet my new #1 lady. It's all in the Star this week.
I didn't know what to do. I mean, I think the stupid report card is so important.
It was like no one paid any attention.
I don't even think they missed me when I left.
When I found out I was pregnant, it was like, I mean, where do you go?
They were arguing so much, I couldn't hear myself think. So I just left.
And then he took the knife out. And I thought, this time he's really going to use it. I mean, the look in his eyes.
Maybe you think you have a good reason for leaving home. For some, there may be no other choice. But often it's just a matter of getting some help for yourself and for your family. There are places all over the country where you can go. To find out where you can get help, call the National Runaway Switchboard. Toll-free and confidential. 800-621-4000. A good connection.
It really got kind of nasty in parts of the Midwest last night, but for the most part, the Twin Cities avoided it.
That's right. It formed to the east and to the south and to the southwest, but we escaped once again, Deb. It's not too bad out there right now. Humidity's a little bit lower than it has been. The present conditions, 76. The temperature, that's 24 Celsius. The humidity, 64%. Our winds are out of the northeast at 12. The pressure steady at 3002. Cooler really everywhere by a couple of degrees today on the 5-state temperatures at the hour. It's 76 here in the cities, also up at Alexandria and Duluth. A little bit warmer down to the southwest and up to the northwest, but the air is a little bit drier, making it not quite as muggy. It was a muggy night, though. The temperatures from overnight reflect that it was warm all the way on up into the southern part of the United States. As far north as Iowa, temperatures into the 70s, a few 80s scattered throughout the south. The cooler air way back in the Rocky Mountains, where it's finally starting to cool off this time of year into the 40-degree readings. If you're one of the lucky folks who's outbound on a flight later this afternoon, you want to know what high temperatures are going to be like elsewhere around the country. Going to be hot down in Vegas and down over the Dallas area. Temperatures in 100 there. 90s across the entire southern half of the nation. 70s up over the Great Lakes, Pacific Northwest. Large area of 80s across the northern tier states on up into the northeast. On the satellite picture, we can show you what's just down from space. Some thunderstorms developing out near Rapid City, South Dakota. They've had thunderstorms all morning long since the morning report. This thunderstorm here started out in Sioux Falls about 4 o'clock this morning, produced some large hail, reduced visibilities to 0 and heavy rain. It has since slid now into northeastern Iowa, but it's clear over Minnesota where a little high pressure center has built in, and that's really been beneficial to us, giving us a rather nice day. What's causing all of this ugly weather that we've had on the national map is a little low pressure center, once again, just like yesterday, out in the western Dakotas, generating some showers and thunderstorms out here. This front then will come back up through us as a warm front, more muggy, sticky weather in store for us tomorrow. The only place that's really going to be nice in terms of good weather is back out to the west coast. There's a slight risk of some severe weather over parts of Minnesota, including the Twin Cities later on today. You might recall in yesterday's slight risk area, we had 7 tornado touchdowns, softball-size hail, and heavy rainfall, but we don't see quite as much development taking place today. On radar, we're not detecting any precipitation within 240 nautical miles of the Twin Cities, so the forecast has only a slight chance of some shower or thunderstorm activity today. Partly cloudy and warm, a high near 85, low of 67, winds east at 5 to 15. For tomorrow, we're looking variable cloudiness with a better chance of thunderstorms, a high near 83, and the extended outlook calls for fair to partly cloudy skies through the weekend, highs from 80 to 85, lows from 60 to 70 degrees. Bill?
Okay. Incidentally, Debbie, for your information, it was Rod Carew, not Reggie Jackson, who is a former Twins player. So we've got that straight. I wouldn't have known the difference either. With the Patco strike dominating the news this noon, we wondered how the airlines are deciding which flights to take off and which ones are canceled, so it seemed natural to bring in our noon report travel specialist, Bill O'Neill, for some of the answers. And Bill, I know that you've been keeping in touch with everybody by phone and by computer and everything all morning, and I guess generally we've fared better in this area than most of the nation, right?
Well, I was even shocked. Within the last hour, I've talked to most of the airline managers locally. And, for example, Republic yesterday operated 78 of 80 flights. Northwest Airlines carried 5,000 passengers, which is about 3% below their normal day's load factor. Everything is operating almost normally. United operated 9 of 11 flights and expects to do as well today. Overall, I would guess we're at somewhere between 75 and 90% with no strandees locally.
And I understand that's unusual around the nation. I think that, however, travelers have to be a little careful because that has been achieved by compacting a couple of flights and adjusting schedules occasionally, I understand.
That's true. You have to be a little flexible. And if a flight is canceled, fortunately, this is not the busiest time of the year for the airlines. And they've been able to find alternate space either on their own line or on another line, but generally within an hour of when you were supposed to leave.
What about those who are going on vacation and are having to have their vacation plans changed? Are they able to get money back?
Well, I talked to two of the cruise lines, for example, this morning, going out of Miami. And if you don't show up, you're not going to get your money back. And
That's
they're
if
not
you're
protecting
on a cruise ship.
If you're on a cruise ship. And the airlines, I talked to Marty Thone from Eastern Airlines that has probably one of the most frequent services down in Florida. And he said that the airlines are not making any special provisions for cruise passengers to get to Florida. So, but the way the flights are operating, at least out of here, you shouldn't have any trouble. But I would plan on getting there ahead of time if you can.
Is there any indication that this may continue? Now, things could change overnight, so you have to be on it moment by moment, right?
It looks like they're able to operate the way they're operating now at about 75 or 80%, but the thing that affects it more than anything else is weather. If there's some bad weather in the east or in the west, it's going to dramatically affect the flights because we need more controllers during the time of bad weather.
Even if that weather isn't here?
That's right.
Okay, Bill O'Neill, our noon report travel specialist, with an update on what's occurring for travelers this day of the PATCO strike. Debbie?
The noon report continues in just a moment with the story of a search of a missing plane in northern Minnesota.
Summer, summer fruits, it wouldn't be summer without them.
Summer plums have never been tastier than they are right now.
Fresh from the tree, taste them and see. Nectarines, plums, and peaches, fruits from California.
You know a good thing when you see it. Summer fruits, juicy, light, and refreshing.
Nature's way of smiling, sunshine on a tree, delicious naturally.
Pick up a plum or two, or three.
I count dollars all day, but when I go home, I count pennies. Here's a smart buy. Gala 120, with 20 more sheets than Bounty.
20 more sheets for 20 more spills.
Gala 120, with 20 more sheets per roll than Bounty. Handy-sized sheets of absorbency. And, count them.
20 more sheets for 20 more spills.
Smart buy.
Gala 120.
The Civil Air Patrol is in the air this noon hour searching for a twin-engine pontoon plane and its 4 passengers. The search is focused between Duluth and Eveleth, where the plane piloted by Irvin Grease of Britt disappeared during the weekend. Grease, his wife, son, and an unidentified passenger were flying to Oshkosh, Wisconsin for an experimental air show. The search for a missing 70-year-old St. Peter man has ended. The body of Herbert Reinke was found late Sunday by a hiker. Reinke had not been seen since July 12th when he wandered away from the St. Peter Hospital. The body was found in a wooded area about a half-mile from the hospital. Authorities say that Reinke died of natural causes.
Investigative teams are combing the rubble of a chemical plant near New Orleans today. Last night, a string of explosions and flash fires ripped through the Celotex plant in nearby Marrero, injuring at least 8 workers. The fires burned near tanks full of highly flammable chemicals, and firefighters spent much of their time trying to keep the tanks from igniting. So far, the cause of the explosions is not known.
A man claiming to be an Irish Republican Army sympathizer forced his way into British offices, government offices in New York this morning. The man told authorities he had a bomb strapped to his wrist. Police evacuated part of the building before they were able to collar the man. Police say the object the man had strapped to his wrist was not explosive. The man is believed to have been a Vietnam veteran. President Reagan and Egyptian President Anwar Sadat meet face-to-face for the first time tonight. When Sadat arrives for 4 days of talks with President Reagan and former President Carter in Washington, the stalled Palestinian autonomy talks will be the prime topic, and then Sadat is slated to travel to Georgia for the meeting with Mr. Carter.
The peace treaty between Egypt and Israel, reached 2 years ago at Camp David, is now finally official. Yesterday, Egypt and Israel signed the final clause of that treaty. That clause requires Israel to remove its forces from the Sinai next April, at which time they'll be replaced by 2,500 peacekeeping troops. There may be another violation of that ceasefire agreement between Israel and Syria. Israel's ambassador to the U.S., Ephraim Ebron, has accused the Saudis of shipping arms to the Palestinian Liberation Organization in southern Lebanon. Ebron made those charges in a meeting with U.S. Secretary of State Haig. Haig has promised to look into the matter, though he says he's never been aware of any Saudi arms shipments to the PLO in the past.
After 3 weeks of bargaining, Israeli Prime Minister Begin has formed a new government today. The agreement with several religious parties permits the coalition to have 61 seats in Israel's Knesset. Wall Street is suffering from an across-the-board decline today. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is down 2.5 points. Analysts report the market is fearful that interest rates may go higher still as the week passes, and they note disappointment on one aspect of the federal tax cut bill requiring that long-term capital gains be held for a year. And we'll be back with a final check on the weather and a summary of the day's news.
Be on the lookout for great entertainment on the next John Davidson Show with Dallas star Steve Carlson.
How does it feel to have such a hit show?
And there's Danielle Brisbois from Archie Bunker's Place.
How do you know about Love at 12?
Catch all the excitement on the next John Davidson Show.
That would be really great.
I don't care what they think about me, and I don't care what they say. I don't care what they think.
The Minnesota National Guard has been with us for more than 100 years, helping our communities and state when disaster threatened, helping us recover when tornadoes strike, or floods or forest fires cause destruction, and keeping our nation free. It takes special people to make our Guard work, people who care about our communities, our state, and our nation. This is Governor Al Quie, asking you to remember that the Guard belongs, and maybe you belong in the Minnesota National Guard.
Summarizing the day's news, members of the nation's air traffic controllers continue their strike against the government, that despite court-ordered fines and threats to fire the strikers. And in Minnesota, U.S. District Court Judge Miles Lord has issued a restraining order ordering air traffic controllers in Minnesota back on the job. That restraining order will remain in effect for 10 days.
Still no breakthroughs in another strike, the strike by 16,000 Minnesota state workers. Negotiations continue today in an effort to end that strike. And strikes also in the world news. Poland's Solidarity Union has called for strike threats through tomorrow in an effort to get more food. And the actor known as the man who made Garbo laugh has died. Two-time Oscar winner Melvyn Douglas died early today in New York City of complications after a heart attack. The 80-year-old Douglas starred in the film classic Ninotchka with Greta Garbo and was honored by his colleagues for his roles in HUD and more recently in Being There. From the Vatican comes news that Pope John Paul may undergo another operation this week. It's nothing serious, though. The surgery is needed to restore normal functioning of the Pope's lower intestinal tract, which was blocked off during emergency surgery in May. Doctors say the operation is so simple it takes less than an hour to perform. That weather kept us on our toes last night. More of it tonight, Dan?
I really don't think so, though. With all the large hail last night, we've had several calls wondering, well, how big can hail get? I mean, softball-size hail. It's interesting to note that there is a world record for hail. The largest hailstone that has ever fallen was approximately 1.67 pounds in weight, 17 inches in circumference. That fell at Coffeyville, Kansas, September 3rd, 1970. As for our forecast, partly cloudy and warm with a chance of thunderstorms, a high near 85. Our low will be about 67. Winds will be east at 5 to 15 miles an hour. Variable cloudiness with a chance of showers and thunderstorms then tomorrow and a high near 83. Bill?
And that's about it for today's edition of the Noon Report. We hope you'll join us again tomorrow at 12.
And in the meantime, join Pat, Doug, and Dave at 5, 6, and 10 for the later news. Enjoy the day. We'll see you tomorrow.
Tribute to Vienna. Enjoy her culture, her music at Sommerfest 81.
Co-sponsored by WCCO Television and the Minnesota Orchestra, with the next concert Wednesday night at 7 at Orchestra Hall. Wunderbar.
Now that our public schools are teaching more children with handicaps, the children without handicaps are getting some special education too. In this school, the children learn what it feels like to have a disability.
It's okay.
They learn something about blindness. They learn something about orthopedic handicaps. And they learn something about themselves. If your child needs special education, we have free information that can help.
That was great, Andy. That was great.
Right closer look, Box 1492, Washington, D.C., 20013.
WCCO Television, Minneapolis, St. Paul.
Staying right here.